This episode of Going in Raw is sponsored by DraftKings Sportsbook. Week 1 of the NFL season is here, and a new season means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL.
And if you're ready to place your first bet, try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown.
So score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the best place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code RAW. That's code RAW for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus premium on us. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus premium terms at nfl.com/terms. Hey, Friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
Welcome back to Going in Raw Count Out on today's episode. In honor of the current CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre blood feud.
Well, and also, we got Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland.
A steel cage.
In a steel cage this weekend at All Out. Possibly the main event. We're going to talk feuds, specifically violent feuds.
Violent feuds. Now, Larson, there's obviously probably a couple of caveats that we didn't really discuss openly, but we can discuss them now that we're filming. Look, we're not necessarily like All Japan Pro Wrestling marks, you know, so I'm sure there are probably some feuds from the early 90s, mid 90s or whatever, you know, that were probably super violent that we just don't know about and we're not going to be experts on. Also, like in the world of deathmatch wrestling necessarily, it's not really our forte, although there are some deathmatch situations on here.
And also the nature of deathmatch wrestling, it's violent.
Yeah, right. Sort of baked in.
That's the first step in the whole process. So
yeah,
I guess these are the ones, for the most part, that were more violent than one would expect given the current landscape the feud took place in. That's not universal. There's some on here that are just like really like two people feuding the course of years all over the world, spilling each other's blood.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to point those things out. As always, these lists are for entertainment purposes only. We are not the definitive word on anything.
Please don't have that notion in your mind that we are.
It's just to have a little fun like we like to do here at the Friendo Club, Larson.
Yeah.
All right. With that out of the way, because you know it's going to be like, why didn't you put this on the list?
I know. Where's sick Nick Mondo versus Matt Tremont?
I'm sure that was a super violent feud.
It was at CZW, so of course it was.
I don't know anything about CZW, though. No. Come on now. Where's what's that dude's name? Zandig. Where's Zandig? Why isn't he on this list? I don't watch that shit. I've seen a couple clips on YouTube of people throwing each other off the top of buildings. Yeah, that's pretty violent, but I don't know anything about it.
It's pretty violent. But the whole thing's violent. The whole thing's predicated on extreme violence in the wrestling context.
This is comparably violent. This is like, oh my God, they did this within the context of this other stuff. All right.
Exactly.
Let's go ahead and dive into it. First up, and this illustrates the point perfectly. Triple H versus Shawn Michaels.
Well, number 10.
Triple H versus Shawn Michaels.
So here's the thing. Like, Shawn Michaels came back in 2002, and it was in the NWO for, like, a cup of coffee, basically.
Yeah, right.
Drop that, and it's like, hey, Paul Hunter, let's get DX back together. Triple H is like, yeah, sure, whoop-ah, swerved him. And they proceeded to feud in a variety of gimmick matches, unsanctioned matches, 3 stages of Hell in a Cell, Last Man Standing matches. For what? Basically a year and a half?
Yeah.
And while their matches might not necessarily be, especially compared to, say, sick Nick Mondo versus Matt Tremont, exceptionally violent. This was still in the early days of the ruthless aggression era when WWE was really kind of embracing blood.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And these matches were plenty bloody, a lot of weapons involved.
Yeah.
And one kind of hallmark of their matches is they were all exceptionally long.
True. Yes. Yeah, they were.
The SummerSlam 2002, the first bout, where Shawn Michaels defeats Triple H in an unsanctioned match. Nearly a half hour. Mm-hmm. There's 3 stages of hell match.
I'm watching the highlights for 3 stages right now. You know who got the worst of it? Ric Flair.
Yeah, the cage, yeah. So that match, which was a street fight, a cage match, and a ladder match for the World Heavyweight title. Triple H won that. That was more than 38 minutes. Mm-hmm. You had a couple of Elimination Chamber matches in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You had a Last Man Standing match on Raw. Mm-hmm. Or sorry, no. Royal Rumble, they went 23.
Dude, I'm watching the highlights of this 3 stages of hell. This is a pretty violent match.
It is. It is
Both
pretty
dudes
violent.
hella bled. HBK did a crazy table spot. Yeah, there's some cool. I know. I mean, look, this is the thing. I joke about it at the onset of this, but this is one thing that I remember. And these guys, they bled a ton.
They did
across this feud. This was an incredibly violent feud.
It was,
especially within the context of WWE. These guys really, you could tell, like Triple H and HBK, they really wanted to make a point with this feud. It wasn't exceptionally, within the context of WWE, very violent.
Their Hell in a Cell match in 2004 went 47 minutes and 26 seconds.
I mean, man, that's a pretty violently long match right there.
Some WWE pay-per-views have that much wrestling across the 2.5, 3 hour runtime.
Yeah, right. Let's see. I'm watching highlights from that now. No doubt set to some new metal music. Oh, yeah, look at the blood. Look at the blood here.
I mean, in this stage of his career, Shawn Michaels is not opposed to bleeding all over the place, nor was Triple H.
Oh God, unprotected chair shots and everything.
Yeah. Talk about a lot of those later on.
Yeah.
So again, in terms of WWE, even for Ruthless Aggression era matches, of course, there were several bloody matches in the Ruthless Aggression era. You got JBL Cena, JBL Eddie Guerrero. Those feuds were just kind of relatively short-lived. By that I mean like 1 or 2 pay-per-view matches, generally 2 pay-per-view matches.
Yeah, no, that's the other thing that I was going to point out. The other caveat at the beginning of this was there are tons of violent one-off matches, like Atsushi Onita versus Hayabusa, the exploding match. Super violent match, really awesome. But I think they only had like one other match beyond that. I don't know if it was like necessarily an actual feud, and I didn't really look it up. But yeah, there's always one-offs like that JBL Eddie Guerrero match, the Cena match you mentioned, where just blood was everywhere. This is not the bloodiest matches; these are the most violent feuds.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
So
and again, for 2002 to 2004 WWE, this is a pretty violent feud.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No apologies made for this one. Let's get into one that, like, boy, a lot of blood was spilled.
Yeah.
Number 9. Nick Gage versus Matt Cardona.
So, again, I feel like caveat's going to be the word of the day on this show. Obviously, Nick Gage has had a lot of feuds that are probably way more violent and way bloodier than this relatively short feud. I feel like we're going to contradict like everything we said in the last century, but whatever. This is our list. This is for entertainment purposes only. We're not authorities on anything.
What are you guys talking about?
But we're going to get into the reasons why this feud is on the list. Okay, So yes, Nick Gage had more feuds, more violent feuds, longer feuds than the one against Matt Cardona back in 2021. Mm-hmm. The reason this is on here is what this feud managed to do for all parties involved. I'm talking about Nick Gage. I'm talking about Matt Cardona. I'm talking about GCW.
Yeah.
In terms of elevating, you have Nick Gage, who'd been in the deathmatch scene for years prior to this match, kind of becoming a bit more of a household name, feuding with Matt Cardona because Matt Cardona is a former WWF guy, and him being involved in this feud brought a lot more eyeballs to it. GCW, a company that's been around for a number of years, they get Matt Cardona in shortly after this feud. John Moxley at their shows elevated their profile. It got it. We did a watch along to a GCW show after all this.
The thing that we did. Was not the GCW the World one?
Yeah, that one wasn't very good.
Yeah, it was not very good. The last time we did one of those.
The first and last time we did GCW watch along. Yeah.
The thing that I loved about this so much was what Cardona did with his character, and then what that character had to experience once he was in the ring with Nick Gage. The look of absolute terror. You know, when you have two guys in there who are like, oh yeah, I love blood, let's just blood each other, right? When you have that, it's like, okay, they're just going to go out there and have a good time cutting each other up, right? And that's great. If you like that, that's awesome. Good for you. If they're safe about it, cool. Cardona did such a great job getting over how fucked up this is, and how, because as part of his character, he was basically WWE superstar Matt Cardona, or former WWE superstar Matt Cardona, coming in claiming that he could big league everybody. And so he had to get in the ring with Nick Gage. And so to experience that, there was something very, I don't know, he was trying to basically make it a proxy for us to a degree. A lot of people who are like, oh man, I'm a WWE fan. And then you step into this world and he's putting over what that was while being like a chicken shit at the same time, a chicken shit heel at the same time, was so much fun to watch. And it was also, he got it across so well. It was mildly disturbing to see him like crying basically in the ring.
Yeah.
And just covered in blood. And then of course, winning the title. But yeah, and that, I think that thing that they did there, because, after his release, he had like, I think maybe a handful of AEW appearances.
Went nowhere.
Run an Impact, really didn't do much for that. But then when he latched on to this, oh, well, I'm going to be the former WWE guy who big leagues the indies. Well, that makes sense. The indie god, he refers to himself, the king of the death matches, he refers to him. And so it was like, oh, now he's unlocked a character. And you and I always talk about when that character is found and how much wrestlers can really benefit from that. Dijak mentioned that in his interview with us as well. It's all about finding that character that resonates. And to do that within the context of this, deathmatch feud, really did a lot, like you said, for him, for the company, for Nick Gage.
Yeah, it really elevated everybody's stock, I think, in the eyes of even more mainstream wrestling fans. And I think at that time, it's probably a lot more people were paying attention to what GCW was doing.
Yeah.
Because after Cardona won the title, he had it for a little bit. Mox took it off him. And you have two former WWE guys feuding over GCW's top title. One, Moxley, with a long history of deathmatch wrestling prior to his time at WWE. Cardona, dubbing himself King of the Deathmatch with only a handful under his belt, weeping his way through it.
Yeah.
It was an interesting juxtaposition. But it all kind of started here with this Nick Gage, Matt Cardona feud. And if, maybe in 5-10 years, we'll be able to look back and get a clear sense of what this feud did for everybody involved. But you think what Nick Gage has been able to do since this? He had a couple AEW appearances, had a match against Chris Jericho.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And could or would that have happened without the Cardona stuff? I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
But I can't say with certainty that it would.
Like, I think the Cardona stuff and then the dark side on Nick Gage really sort of, took him to really capture a certain chunk of the pro wrestling zeitgeist. So much so that then they brought him into AEW. I absolutely think that the Cardona stuff helped. There was a run there when GCW really, obviously they're still going to this day. They're still doing really cool stuff to this day. And I'm sure there's some incredibly violent feuds happening right now that I have no idea about. But yeah, no, it's given a lot more wrestlers a place to work. And I think their success, the extent of their success, was greatly helped by the Cardona stuff.
Well, this is interesting. It was only a matter of a few days after the Cardona match that Gage had the match against Jericho.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was July 24th where Cardona beat Gage for the title, and then it was July 28th, so 4 days later.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. Well, that's pretty cool. Anyways, let's move on now to number 8. Swerve Strickland versus Hangman Adam Page. Boy.
Can you think of a feud that's gotten this intense, this violent in recent history?
I think with people pearl clutching so hardcore over their Texas death match, I think the drinking of the blood really set some people off. The answer to that is no.
Yeah, no, I don't mean you could maybe talk about Punk and MJF leading up to their dog collar match. We just mentioned Gage and Cardona, that happened relatively recently, but in terms of building to the crescendo of the Texas Death Match, and what I always liked about the Texas Death Match, it wasn't violence for violence sakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was very much rooted and based in character and the evolution of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
Where Page, after Swerve, invaded his house, had such bloodlust, that he was literally drinking Swerve's blood in the middle of the match, and so many moments in this match, the staples where Swerve was stapling his chest, just really built up Swerve as kind of like this final boss in AEW. We saw that against Danielson, where he just absorbed a D+. That's what I think that really set that particular match apart from just a lot of other Texas Death matches, which are, they could be enjoyable. They're violent, but this one was so based on character and character development. That for me, that's what really made it excellent.
And the extent that it changed Hangman Adam Page's character, like a 180 basically.
Yeah.
It completely, any shred of all of those insecurities just came exploding out because of this feud.
Yep.
And it's turned him into a much more compelling character. It's given him probably one of the most interesting character arcs, character developments that we've seen in pro wrestling in modern times. Yep. He's just a phenomenally performed character, and this is just a feud that I'm really looking forward to this cage match. I think they might go overboard with the violence. I hope they do. I don't know if they're looking to top the Texas Death Match. I don't know if they want to. I don't know if they could.
That's tough to do.
It really is tough to do. But this should be just a phenomenal match, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. And in terms of the story of Hangman Page, it's interesting that he lost this match the same way he beat Mox in his Texas Death Match against Jon Moxley.
Mm-hmm.
Chain wrapped around the neck, getting choked.
Yeah.
And it's these interesting parallels they're throwing in there that is really effective. Even in the build to their matches, they had the contract signing where Hangman stabbed Swerve in the hand with the pen.
Mm-hmm.
Their first match, while not as violent, was really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Swerve needed to use Nanda's crown to win. And then they had the time limit draw, I believe. They've had 3 matches. They've all been excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And while other feuds on this list might be more consistently violent, just the level of excellence in terms of character development, portrayals of said characters, the intensity that never seems to die down between the two of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Has made this wildly entertaining, even if they're not spilling each other's blood all over the country.
Dude, I was reflecting the other day while I was in my car about AEW. There was a whole debate online about why AEW doesn't use Danhausen more than they do. And it does seem like maybe and I don't know for sure, but AEW really did sort of turn the switch on with a couple things. I think the signings of a couple free agents, Okada, Mercedes, the big free agent signing thing, Ospreay, Okada, Mercedes. Yeah. Plus the Continental Classic, I think, and I think getting rid of Punk sort of took AEW in a direction where I don't know if you could really say that, they don't know what their identity is anymore. I think when Tony stumbled upon that cheesy phrase of his where the best wrestle, you go from there and then you add, and you also realize that you got to have character, you got to have story. But if you start with the wrestling and then you go outward in the character and the story, then you're in a pretty good spot. And I think a lot of their stuff is informed by that these days. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of, I think, why Danhausen, a character like that, might not work in today's AEW. And perhaps that's one reason why. I don't know. But all that's to say, the Hangman Swerve feud is also, I think, one of those inciting things where it's like, this is something we have that's really good. Mm-hmm. And if we try to at least give everything that amount of injection of character and story, and it's not overwhelming. That's the thing. It's not overwhelming. It's just a good ratio. And we inject the wrestling with that.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you can get that with everything, and you've seen more and more feuds kind of follow a similar template, not in terms of the violence or the exact story beats, but the level of character and story that's then sort of injected into the match is not overwhelming like some claim WWE is.
Yeah.
But it's a certain ratio that you need, and the consistency across it, I think, is what AEW is starting to sort of put together. That is a recipe for some amount of success. I mean, it depends. If they get this TV deal, you got to call it a success. If they don't get the TV deal, probably not a success. But
well, maybe not a success on the magnitude that it could have been had they got the TV deal.
Right? Yeah. So I do think that was part of the realization of what AEW needs to be, the Hangman Page stuff. Anyways, You know what, Larson? We've talked about AEW, we've talked about WWE. How about let's take to the rest of the world, okay? We're gonna get to a couple more entries to the rest of the entries. I don't think there's another WWE entry on here.
No.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and pay some bills first, though.
Let's do it. Let's take a quick break here. Get a word from our sponsor, DraftKings Sportsbook. Week 1 of the NFL season is here, Steve. Yeah! And a new season means I'm starting to practice the Philadelphia Eagles fight song anticipation for Week 1. You ready? Fly, Eagles, fly.
No, I already heard it yesterday. I don't need to hear it again.
Victory.
We're good. Listen, though, a new season also means new ways to get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. And hey, if you're looking to place your first bet, you can bet on something as simple as picking a player to score a touchdown.
Oh, speaking of touchdowns, I've been working on a new touchdown dance to do whenever the Eagles score a TD. You want to see it, Steve?
Nope. I don't want to. Nope.
All right. Well, fine. I'm looking at the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now, and it would appear that my Eagles' favorite season opener. I'm going to get my TD celebration ready for the game. Ready? And Eagles fight song. Fly, Eagles, fly. Score a touchdown. 1, 2, 3.
So score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the best place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code RAW. That's code RAW for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium on us. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/FTBall. NFL Plus Premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus Premium terms at NFL.com/terms. Let's move on now to number 7.
7.
ECW represents Masato Tanaka versus Mike Awesome. Oh my God.
You know, you talked a lot about how seeing RVD wrestle for the first time was like a revelation to you. About how
it was, man.
And I'm not going to disagree with that, but almost as much as seeing RVD wrestle for the first time, for me personally, seeing Tanaka and Mike Awesome in there, and it wasn't like their matches just left blood all over the mat or anything like that. There was a lot of dented chairs from unprotected chair shots to the head.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
And generally speaking, a lot of busted tables in the ring, out of the ring, all over the ringside area. Mm-hmm. And these two guys would bash each other in the head with chairs and put each other through tables to a degree that I'm honestly kind of surprised more people don't talk about. Mm-hmm. Like, I've heard some people mention Mike Awesome, how influential he was.
Yeah.
Same with Tanaka. And their feud in ECW actually goes all the way back to Japan. I think it was 1995 in FMW. Correct. They started
when Mike Awesome was the Gladiator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they came over to ECW same time. And basically, like every other week, they'd have a match.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were always great. And it always involved Mike Awesome trying to powerbomb Tanaka through a table, out of the ring through a table. And at times he'd be successful. Sometimes Tanaka would be the one to send Mike Awesome out of the ring through a table. And, you know, I think a lot of people probably might be more aware of Mike Awesome as that 70s dude in WCW.
Yeah.
Where they really undersold in WCW what he could do in the ring for a guy his size.
Yeah.
Doing some of the crazy shit he was doing, making it look effortless.
Yeah.
Again, it was eye-opening for me as a wrestling fan who more or less only really watched WWF and at the time WCW stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude. No, I agree with that. This was one of their staple feuds during the last couple of years of ECW, 97, 98, 99 maybe. They came back for that one of the WWE One Night Stands.
Oh, man, the finish of that match is fucking incredible. I watched that again. Oh, my God.
But, yeah, just, the clips of these two with Mike Awesome just powerbombing the shit out of Tanaka all over the place. Yeah, and honestly, like, this is the kind of thing I know we just talk story. I have no idea if there was much story here. I don't know. But you're right. They wrestled a lot. So all together across their careers, they wrestled 24 times. 14 were singles matches. And there was that stretch. In 98, they wrestled, let's see here, 2 matches in July. No, wait, 1. So there was two singles matches in 98, but then 99... there was 1, 2, 3. There was like 4 in 99, a bunch more in 2000. And again, I don't know if there's any story. Didn't really matter. Every single time they'd get in the ring together, it's like, oh, these guys fucking hate each other and they're going to try to kill each other. Mm-hmm. And these things were incredibly violent. They were so much fun. And like you said, I don't remember any of them that you'd see blood. But you got to think that there is some fucked up things happening because all those high angle power bombs that Mike Awesome be dropping, all the chair shots that they be hitting each other with, man, definitely nothing you'd see today. No, but still absolutely phenomenal stuff. And I agree. This is one of those things where if you turn on for the first time, the only thing you know about is WWF or WCW. You're like, oh God, this can't be healthy for these guys.
Yeah. But also, you're amazed by the athleticism. It's not just brutality, Mm-hmm. It's creative athletic brutality.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And some of the stuff that they were doing was just blew my mind. I remember the first time we saw Tanaka's finisher, because it was like a sliced bread stunner combo. We're like, what the heck is this? This is crazy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We were probably sitting in our apartment in L.A. watching ECW at 1 a.m. and saw that for the first time.
Right. Yeah, that sounds right.
And yeah, gosh, whenever they announced that one of their matches was going to be on the show, I was hype.
Yeah, always.
Because you were going to get something that was wildly entertaining. They were going to give you something you hadn't seen before, and it was, in hindsight, going to be pretty brutal.
What year was 2000 the Los Angeles show? Did we see them live? I'm trying to remember what year the.
I don't remember. Mike Awesome might have left by that point.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, he was. Sense. I think he had it was this early 2000. He left for. WCW.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it would have been because in March of 2000 he had his last match. Mm-hmm. There, it was a tag match.
Yeah.
Of course, it was Mike Awesome and Raven versus Tommy Dreamer, Masato Tanaka versus Justin Credible and Lance Storm.
Yep.
Anyways, moving on to number 6. Mick Foley versus Vader.
So this is one of those feuds that really stuck out given the context in which it took place.
Yeah.
You got early 90s WCW, not necessarily known for hard-hitting. This is like 10 years past, and so going through this list, you can make the point, kind of the violent peak of the NWA, where so much of it was, let's put 2 to 4 dudes in the ring and try to put on a really believable fight.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Because we'll get to that later. Mm-hmm. A few instances of that. This is a decade past that, and things in WCW at this point were a lot more over the top. I think this is around the same time they had that Chamber of Horrors cage match where Abdul the Butcher got electrocuted. It was corny.
Yeah. And
you have Foley and Vader in there in the ring, beating the hell out of each other. Foley telling Vader, hey, punch me for real during a match.
Yeah.
Getting power-bombed on the concrete, losing his memory for a spell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then their famous Texas Death Match, a Halloween Havoc 93.
Yeah.
That was just a level of physicality and brutality that you just didn't see in nationally televised wrestling at the time.
So, yeah, the Chamber of Horrors was like 2 years before this, but that whole period of time, talk about a company just throwing shit at the wall to see what stuck. They were doing that for basically until Hogan got there.
Yeah.
Like it seemed like once Flair left, they were like, yeah, we don't really know what to be anymore. And so they spent like years, even when he got back, trying to figure out what the hell they were. And so you'd get at Halloween Havoc, which you got to figure it's probably supposed to be a relatively family friendly show. You got a Texas death match in the main event. And around this time, 93 is a low, like probably the low year in the history of North America, of American wrestling. Because like, if you look at, I remember somebody on Twitter had like a breakdown because, people are comparing AEW. Oh, it's like WCW, they're only getting 1,900 people in their venue. Dude, WCW in 93 were pulling like 75 people in high school gyms in some cases.
Yeah.
Or like 200. And so there's like not really a comparison here. And it's funny because they had so much great talent, but had no idea how to put any of it together. Just no clue. And so then you end up with a Texas death match to main event Halloween Havoc 1993. And it is an incredibly violent match and such a good one at that. But yeah, Foley and Vader were feuding as if they were in Japan, but in WCW.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting here reading up on it a bit how this feud was one of the reasons that led to Foley wanting to leave WCW. It's not the nature of the feud itself. So you go to 94 after Halloween Havoc, and it was a match against Vader where Foley lost his ear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
During a European tour. And then their final match was another Texas death match, this one April of 94. Mm-hmm. Again, Vader powerbomb, Foley on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So they're hitting all these story beats to reference previous moments in their feud, but apparently commentary didn't make those connections at all for the audience. Foley was upset about it.
Yeah.
And I guess even earlier on, after the initial powerbomb on the floor, rather than coming up with a story that was serious that might garner some measure of sympathy for Mick Foley, they had these vignettes where he was institutionalized essentially because of that. And it just seemed like from a creative standpoint, Foley was upset about how, he had put everything into this feud with Vader seemingly, and the company just kind of didn't really seem to care about telling a story of any depth beyond what they were doing in the ring. And he's like, to hell with this. Contract is up. He left.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, dude, no, just really good stuff. We'll talk about Mick Foley a little bit more here after this one. Number 5. Buzz Sawyer versus Tommy Rich.
So it was was it 2016 or the last Battle of Atlanta finally was unearthed?
Why does that feel like it was just like a couple of...
I know.
When I saw 2016, I was like, I'd have sworn this was like 2019 at the latest.
I know, me too.
Or at the earliest. Yeah, so this was a match that, it was basically the holy grail of wrestling matches. A lot of people, nobody knew where this was. There was always rumors that there was this match that was on TV or that was on tape somewhere, but it was the famous blow-off feud between Buzz Sawyer.
It wasn't even the blow-off to their match. They had more matches after this one.
Yeah, they did. I mean, this was kind because Buzz went face after this. And so it was kind of the blow off to like the feud, I think. Like they had a match in 1990 like on WCW,
no, they had,
I think.
4 days after last Battle Atlanta, they had a dog collar match. And then
all right, I didn't. Okay.
In November 2nd and 3rd of 83, same year, they had cage matches.
Oh, they had more cage matches.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So I don't know if
back then, I wonder if back then, like the blow off match meant like this is going to be the blow off program because the same thing we're going to talk about Roddy Piper and Greg Valentine. They did the big dog collar match at Starrcade, which Greg Valentine called the blow off, and then they're like, "You're going to do 19 of these."
Yeah, you're going to do 40 more of these. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So. Yeah.
So yeah, no, or it could be a situation where the steel cage match, the last Battle of Atlanta, was supposed to be like, for the public writ large, the blow-off. But then they would take this on the road.
The house show
circuit, which was the case. We'll get to more of that with Piper and Valentine.
Because this was on TV. This was on Georgia Championship Wrestling television, and the tape disappeared.
Yeah, the other matches were just at events. So
okay, that makes sense. Okay, so yeah, that does actually make some sense.
But looking back and doing a little research on this,
then.
this feud started because Buzz Sawyer beat Tommy Rich for the national title, national heavyweight NWA national heavyweight title, and then they just proceeded to feud for the next year and a half, basically 2 years. I'm not sure if there was any major story beats other than they beat the hell out of each other. They have all sorts of gimmick matches.
So I found a message board from 2010 that asked exactly that question. It was like, how did this thing start? Like, what were the story beats? And people are generally like, this was a feud that didn't really have any story beats, but it drew a lot of blood because whenever they would fight, it would be incredibly violent. And it never really had a point to it. It was just Buzz Sawyer's a bad guy, Tommy Rich is a good guy, and then they'd go at it. And like I think the build to the last Battle of Atlanta, they had like promos and brawls and stuff like that. But this is a feud that sort of like started, died down, kicked back up, died back down for little rhyme or reason. So much of it, so much of the appeal. I'll be honest with you. I was watching this and I was reading this message board thing, dude, and I was like, if I could choose any era of pro wrestling to be a fan in, it would be this time, because everybody was like the Bill Apter magazines back then would be pushing this like it was the fucking craziest thing ever. Well, Bill Apter was really close with like the Georgia Championship Wrestling people, and so he was very friendly to all their feuds. But the amount of like the myth of this match, the last Battle of Atlanta one,
enormous,
was just enormous. And I'll be honest, it's an incredibly violent match. Like, it's a super bloody match with an incredibly silly finish by today's standards, because it didn't really have like a proper finish. Like, they were just beating the shit out of each other, and then Tommy Rich throws Buzz Sawyer headfirst into one of the braces for the cage, and then he fell back, and then Tommy Rich crawled over to him and pinned him, and that was it. There was no finishing move. And these old dudes, these old Southern guys, they would try their damnedest to make this shit feel real. And you'd hear the crowds, man. Like, they were so into this stuff. And then to like have these magazines out there that are like talking up the lore, because you can't be at every show. You're not going to watch everything. There's no reruns back then. Nobody really had, except if you're a Larson household, VCRs to tape stuff off TV.
I didn't know if we had one in 83.
But yeah, no, this, apparently, or, according to the Apter mags anyways, an incredibly violent feud with little rhyme or reason. And then it just sort of ended up having this incredible blow off, and then more blow-offs after that.
Well, so much, I'm looking at Cage Match here, and so much of this feud took place at live events.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Yeah, right.
Only a handful of their matches were ever televised.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And, I wonder if it's a situation where you have last Battle of Atlanta, and they consider it such a success, or like, well, we got to revisit that for a few shows that aren't televised, before, the feud eventually just kind of petered out here in November of 83.
Well, yeah, but like I said, I honestly think that things were just done a little bit different. Like when you think of Piper and Valentine at Starrcade.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I was really kind of surprised when I heard Piper on the shoot interview say, yeah, they gave us the booking sheet. It's like, okay, well, this is the blow off to your feud, but the blow off is going to be a tour, which is an interesting concept.
It is. And I wonder if this was kind of the same philosophy.
Yeah, it seems like it probably was.
Now we got to take that on the road for a little bit so we can draw money with it.
It's literally in the same time frame.
Yeah, it is.
So, yeah. But anyways, yeah. Let's move on now to number 4. Mick Foley versus Terry Funk. Boy, this one lasted a long time because we wove through a ton of different companies across basically like 2 decades, kind of.
Kind of, yeah, and I probably their most
the 90s and a little bit like what was the date? Because they did did they do something in 2000 for WWF?
They had a one-on-one match in '98.
Okay, all right.
The only match they had together in the 2000s is when it was
the tag, the mixed tag, right?
Yeah, okay. At One Night Stand 2006.
All right. Well,
but they did have the one-on-one match in '98 in WWF.
Went across multiple promotions.
So yeah, they had 2. They had Cactus Jack versus Chainsaw Charlie, and then later on Foley and Terry Funk. You know, most of it was ECW and in Japan.
IWA,
you know, and
Japan,
it was the famous or infamous IWA deathmatch tournament. They met in the finals.
Yeah.
The barbed wire exploding death match.
And that is that match does look kind of like a snuff film. Like, it's so funny because at first, like, you know, they do a lockup. And then,
I know.
And then, because I just watched it earlier, and then Punk, like, peppers some really weak looking punches towards Foley. And then, like, you know, 5 minutes 5 minutes later, there's just smoke in the ring, and Foley's like rubbing Funk's head on the barbed wire.
Yeah.
They kicked up a notch pretty quickly. And at that point, it's like, oh my God, this is violent. This is hella violent.
It is. It got really violent really fast, you know. You know, but there was a couple other matches they had. There's a tag match where Foley teamed with the Headhunters against a team headed by Terry Funk. They had a singles match prior to the death match tournament. That was also a barbed wire match. A couple matches at ECW, kind of bookending most of that. So, you know, I was reading up on kind of like the history of that particular phase in '95 when they were doing more of the hardcore stuff and how. I remember watching this promo because Foley drops a promo before the finals of that deathmatch tournament. And I'm trying to paraphrase as I remember it what he said, but essentially I think it was something along the lines of, "You're my friend, Terry. My legacy is not to the same, you know, caliber as yours, but if I beat you, then I will. Then it will be at that point."
Yeah.
Gosh, these guys tore each other apart in this match, and you see like the burns they have from the C4. It's nuts. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
It's one of those hallmark matches in wrestling history, though. You kind of have to watch it.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. And then, of course, in ECW, they had the big chair throwing thing, and it's funny because I watched this one too, the one where Funk brands Foley with the iron, you know, with the flaming.
Oh, the branding iron.
The branding iron. The actual match itself is kind of crap, to be honest with you. It's really slow and plodding. But yeah, no, the IWA stuff is absolutely like brutal. It is super brutal. But yeah, I remember. I think didn't Jeff have that on VHS? It was like Japan's.
I had a whole tape of Foley stuff in Japan. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
A bunch of tag matches, and that was kind of like the culmination of it all was that match. And then I think we were at his place once, and it was like on Amazon or something like that. They had. I think this whole tournament on there.
I remember that. Yeah.
And we watched
That's what I was thinking. Good stuff. Let's move on now to number 3, since we already talked about it a bunch.
3.
Roddy Piper versus Greg Valentine.
The origins of this particular feud and this dog collar match, they had to tour around the country, is fascinating.
Yeah.
Where they go to Piper and Valentine. I think it was Jim Crockett, because it was when they were working for Crockett. So whether it was Crockett or someone who worked for Jim Crockett, said, we want you to come up with a match style that's so brutal that we could make money across the country with it. And so as Piper tells it, he goes and gets 12 feet of like heavy-duty chain and a couple dog collars.
Yeah.
And then puts wool on the inside of the dog collars. And that's it. And then they go and they beat the shit out of each other for 16 minutes, bleed all over the place.
That was a Starrcade one, right?
That was Starrcade 83, the first one.
Yeah.
So the whole feud got started because I guess Greg Valentine was the U.S. champ. He blasts Piper in the ear with the title, and as Valentine tells it, he hits him pretty hard, but Piper, you know, blades anyways, and Valentine says he just about cuts his ear off.
Yeah.
So he's bleeding all over the place.
Yeah.
And Piper was a babyface back then.
Yeah.
And a really effective one. And so it set up this match at Starrcade 83, and I before watching it today, I'd never seen it before. I've heard about it, obviously.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the history maybe of dog collar matches in NWA, if there ever was one prior to this. But those two guys sold the magnitude of what they were getting themselves into immediately. The look on Greg Valentine's face when that bell rings.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit.
Yeah.
What have I gotten myself into? This is gonna suck.
They both immediately back up because nobody wants the slack. Nobody wants the other guy to get the slack, and so they go.
And they're both like playing tug of war, but just using their necks to pull back and forth. It's a really good match. It's brutal, but for the time, it's fairly creative in terms of the structure of it.
Well, the funny thing is, Valentine. I watched a shoot interview with Valentine. He said we had the first 3 minutes of the match mapped out. The rest was ad-libbed.
That's crazy because the finish is really creative.
Yeah. Yeah,
I wonder if they had that. I mean,
maybe maybe it was the finish. I think it was. I know he definitely said the start. If the finish was super creative, then maybe that was the case.
Because what it was is Piper pulled Valentine off the second rope using the chain, hit some punches, and then used the chain to get leverage on a roll up.
Oh, okay.
But they're both bleeding all over the place. They're punching each other with the chain.
Yeah.
I can see why it's so influential. Punk mentioned it in the build-up to his own dog collar match against MJF.
Yeah.
But the crazy part is then they had to go and do this 40 times after this. I think.
Well, I know Piper, and the thing that I saw, Piper said, because I was like, really? That sounds like an exaggeration. He was like, we were backstage, and it's funny because like he had also said like during the match, Valentine, while he was, hitting him with some punches, and Valentine claims that they were like legitimately, they worked really snug. They worked really snug back then. I think a lot of people did. But he was punching him, and as he was punching him, he was yelling at Piper at how terrible an idea this was because it sucked. So they get backstage, and he's like, and Piper's like, my ears all busted up. And we're just hating life. We're both hurt bad. Like we are not in a good way. And that's when the booker came up. And I specifically remember the number 19. He said, we have to do this 19 more times. And then I got in cage match and I looked, I was like, oh my God, he wasn't joking. It's like dog collar, dog collar, dog collar, dog collar. So yeah, I don't know if it got any better for them or not. If they they learned from it and decided to take it a bit easier.
Yeah, who knows? This is from Pro Wrestling Stories. This is a quote from Piper. It says, Greg and I did this match about 40 times.
Okay, all right. It must have been so popular the first 20 times.
They doubled it up then.
Yeah, maybe that could be. That's funny.
He said by the time of the 29th match, they both had rashes really bad under their neck from the dog collar. He mentioned,
yeah. He was like, Valentine was pissed that I decided to put wool under the thing.
Yeah. So it's crazy they did that match to begin with.
Yeah, right.
And then they had to take that same match out on the road.
Well, it's crazy that Piper was like, sure, I'll make a match so violent, and he didn't try to think of something that was like fake violent. Like it's one thing
appeared violent.
Yeah, that appeared violent, because you dump a bunch of blood. It's like, okay, this seems pretty violent. You can get some like gimmicked weapons of some sort, like a machete match. Get some dull machetes and you're fine.
Here in the number one entry, we're going to talk about a feud that was exceptionally bloody. Mm-hmm. A lot of these matches, they didn't do much.
Yeah, we'll get there. Let's talk about a feud where a lot was done. We can do number 2. Vic Grimes versus New Jack. Bro. What the fuck, man? So this is a feud of 2 spots. But they're very, very just nasty spots. Starting ECW, New Jack versus Vic Grimes. And I don't know, this was not a scaffolding match, but there was like an elevated scaffolding nearby. And they went up top, and I guess they discussed during the match, hey, we're gonna go jump off this thing. And once they got up there, Vic was like, I don't really want to do this. And New Jack was like, you're gonna do it. And so he just, you can see it was in Dark Side of the Ring and everything.
Yeah.
And you see him, grab Vic Grimes, and they kind of do a bit of a flip where Vic Grimes ends up basically the weight of his entire body. He was a big dude, landed on New Jack's head, which was just on concrete. And, he said there was like brain matter that came down through his sinuses, which is just horrific.
Brain fluid.
Yeah. And so he was pretty messed up from that. I think like a year and a half later, it was like a year and a half later, fast forward to ECW ripoff XPW. And Rob Black says, hey, you guys going to do the scaffolding match? This is the one where the dude from XP on Dark Side, the guy from XPW is like, yeah, I just forged the insurance papers. and the venue took them and was fine with it. He was like, I found some old ones and I whited out some stuff and put it in. So they didn't have insurance for this. So they had a scaffolding, just an insanely high scaffolding up there.
And 30 tables in the ring set up?
And a ton of tables in the ring set up. And New Jack evidently, and, again, with New Jack, you never know what is exaggerated or what isn't. But what isn't exaggerated is he got a taser. And he went up there and he tased Vic Grimes. And he claims that Grimes said, I can't feel my legs, Jack. And then New Jack just flings him off. And, if he hadn't done kind of a fortunate flip where he the majority of his fall hit the tables, but he skidded off the tables and then hit the ropes and bounced off and just sort of landed in the ring. The most fortuitous fall you would ever see, because if he hit none of that, he would be dead. Even if he just skidded off the table, there's a chance that he'd be dead because there's nothing but concrete down there. Mm-hmm. And yes, it is a 2-match feud, but it is a feud because New Jack wanted this guy hurt, thought about it in advance, and did what it took to get there.
Yeah, both these spots are incredibly difficult to watch.
They are.
Incredibly.
Especially the first one, especially knowing what it did to New Jack. Oh.
Yeah, it's really tough to watch.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is too, because once Vic Grimes is off that scaffold and he's tumbling towards the ground, you don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
it's damn. But that's honestly, every scaffold match I've seen, like the one with Tommy Dreamer and was it Brian Lee?
Mm-hmm.
That's horrifying too. When Brian Lee gets knocked off that scaffold.
Well, there's the one where Jim Cornette blows out both of his knees
because he jumps off the scaffold. Yeah.
Oh.
Well, he's hanging on the bottom of it and he falls off. But and he blows out both his knees.
Dude.
Not a fan of scaffold matches.
No, they honestly are terrible.
Because another thing about it is what are you gonna do on a platform that's 3 or 4 feet wide?
Yeah.
You're up there punching each other a bunch.
Oh, they look so stupid when they're up there.
I know. You're up there punching each other. You have to do these really awkward moments where you're trying to push someone off, but they got to hold on. But they got to do it super safely.
You just do maybe a really tepid pile driver, where you get the guy, put it there, and you just sort of all tumble back a little bit,
Gimmick, perhaps the worst gimmick match in terms of one, enjoyment because they are not good.
Yeah.
2, just sitting here and clutching pearls, hoping no one gets hurt.
We should do a worst gimmicks match.
We should. Scaffold match is
I'm down
for number one.
I'm down for that being number one. Spoiler alert, it's gonna be number one. Let's move on to number one on this list, though. Number one. Bruiser Brody versus Abdullah the Butcher.
They went around the country, around the world, making each other bleed.
Yeah.
I mean, you could look at their foreheads. How many of those scars in their foreheads are from matches against one another?
Probably a lot. Yeah,
probably a lot.
Because I was texting you while I was watching one of their matches. I think it might have been their last recorded match or taped one or whatever. And it's funny because these matches are essentially 2 guys lumbering about. Sometimes one guy just leaves and Bruiser Brody, the other guy, calls the other guy out for 10 minutes until he finally comes out. And then they just start stabbing.
Abdullah gets the fork out and starts stabbing Bruiser Brody in the forehead. Yeah.
Each other.
Yep.
And there's one. And dude, talk about, and it's funny because also it's in Puerto Rico. The footage is so video grainy, and talk about looking like a snuff film because they'd always be bleeding. They look like maniacs. And you'd get shit like Bruiser Brody would find some cable and he'd be hanging Abdullah the Butcher over the ropes with the cable. And it just looks like something out of Faces of Death. It looks so horrible. But, these two had wildly good character chemistry anyways. You see them next to each other, it's oh, this just fits.
Yeah.
And then their names, it just makes all the sense in the world. And they went from Japan. Most of their super violent matches were in Puerto Rico for WWC. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, when you just think of the phrase most violent wrestling feuds, Abdullah the Butcher and Bruiser Brody, I think for most people who know anything about wrestling, tops.
Yeah, it's up there towards tops. No other reason the longevity of it. Mm-hmm, literally for 7 years.
Yeah.
basically for 7 years. A lot of it in WCCW. But yeah, you mentioned Puerto Rico. I think they had at least one match in Japan. And so much of it was not so much about who was going to win the bout. A lot of them don't even have finishes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's just all about inflicting maximum damage to each other and just creating so much mayhem that the crowd's invested.
Yeah. Like Brody would be coming up into the crowd, like moving
throwing
through the
chairs.
There was one, like his boot was off and he was just rolling with like one sock and one boot. Yeah, it was just absolute madness. But the crowd would just eat it up. Yeah. So anyways. Hey. Drop us some comments. Let us know what feuds we left off this list that you guys think that we're idiots for leaving these feuds off this. That's what we want.
I want to see at least 10 Nick Gage feuds that are more violent, more lengthy than his 3-show deal with Matt Cardona.
You guys are probably right. You guys are probably absolutely right.
Totally.
Yeah.
But the impact of that feud, you can't discount.
No. You don't have to justify it. This is our list. That's what I was going to say, but this is our list. You make your own list. Yeah,
make your own list. But have at it. Make your own list in the comments.
1 through
10.
Come on. Let's hear a whole dissertation. Give us your college thesis on violent matches. Anyways, that's going to do it for the show. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate it. Hit that thumbs up. Hit that subscribe. We'll see you guys around.
Goodbye.